Hello and everybody, welcome to the show. Around the Nation right here, Jeff Waldorf here with you. It's kind of weird without the intro music, but nonetheless, we've got a great show for you guys today here, including some of the breaking news about Trump's announcement with respect to the border wall. Then we've got McCabe, and I think maybe we figured out exactly why he just announced, or at least one of the reasons he announced the state of emergency on the wall. And I think it has to do with McCabe, but we'll get into that more later. So a couple of those. Then we have a new report where Trump had actually begged Fox News hosts for help. That's fun. I love that story. Then we have millionaires that are asking New York, the New York governor, to increase taxes. That's interesting. And then dining while black. So hopefully we can get to that story, because that's an amazing story as well, and it's really gonna, I think, get your blood boiling. All right. So that's the, that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to do some deep dives. We'll have some fun. But let's see. There's a lot of stuff that's going on today, including that's national emergency. So, you know what? Why don't we get into it after we take the super chat and do some shout outs. Richard Hunter in the chat says, hey, love the show. What events are we planning to do with the camera? Any Republican ones? I never thought about doing actually Republican events. I was thinking of doing, I was planning on doing some, like, the events that come to Michigan for the Democratic primary. But I can do Republican ones if you want to see it. So, maybe try to do, like, be a little bit like Emma Vigeland, maybe do some interviews and stuff at some of the Trump rallies. I don't know if I can keep my cool as good as Emma, though. I would probably want to argue with these people. But anyway, that's the kind of stuff that we're planning on doing. I also want to do some interviews as well. See if I can get some, bigger people on the show, politicians in this area. So that's what we're looking at doing with the camera. But I appreciate your question. Thank you for that. And thank you for the super chat. Now, let's go to memberships here. First, I want to thank Lisa Stasi. Hopefully I said that right, for becoming a member. So you can sign up to become a member, of course, hitting the join button on our main YouTube page. We also have patron shout-outs here. We have Ali Gonzalez-Perez, Ali Yuldrum, Alan Johnson, Allison Bice, and Amanda Robinson. So thank you to all of those who've signed up to become a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That's how you can sign up to help the show. We're also still doing that camera drive, as the Super Chat poster had mentioned. So we are working to get money for a really good camera. We're looking at professional grade here, so we can go out and do those events. And any events that you guys think are newsworthy that we should cover. All right. Anyway, with that all set, one more piece of news, right? Which I thought was really, really interesting. And it's kind of getting buried by everything, but it's actually a big victory. Turns out Amazon has canceled its plans to build HQ2 in New York. So that's actually a big victory for people who are pushing back on that, because what it was going to do is that basically the state of New York was going to give Amazon tons and tons of money in tax breaks and incentives to build Amazon's HQ2 in that area. It would have been an incredibly expensive boondoggle for the city. So a lot of local activists pushed back, Nomiki Konst, among others, who's running to be the public advocate for New York. And I think she'd make an excellent advocate, by the way. And she is a good friend of the show. And all that work, pushing back on that, and holding Amazon accountable, they have finally said, okay, that's it. We're not going to build here. We're going to go somewhere else. So who knows where they're going to build HQ2, but it's definitely not in Queens, New York. So that is a victory for local activism. All right. That said, Now we'll get into some breaking news. Okay. There we go. All right. And it has begun. It's now being reported that Donald Trump will soon be declaring a national emergency in order to get the wall. So this is a national emergency on the border to get funding for his ridiculous border wall. And this is actually according to Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. So this is not, it's not hearsay. This isn't like a joke. No, this is Mitch McConnell saying, first, President Trump is going to sign the bill to keep the government open. And in doing so, he will also declare a national emergency. So now, as I said, he is signing that that bill, that bipartisan compromise to keep the government open. And in doing so, he's getting $1.37 billion. I'm sorry, $1.375 billion in border security funding. That's going to go and build actual steel slats for 55 miles. So he's getting that. And now he's saying, okay, now I'm going to go and take money from the military, and I'm going to use that to build an actual concrete barrier. So, great. Now, Trump is prepared to sign the bill and will also declare a national emergency, as Mitch McConnell was quoted saying. So what's the emergency, really? I mean, he says, oh, national emergency in the border. We've got to build a border wall. No, Trump had 2 years to make a factual case on why we need a wall. He has failed. There are no facts. The facts do not back him up. Now, I know what he's saying, but he is a pathological liar. Everything that he has said, from, drugs pouring into the border, people pouring into the border from Mexico, etc., the caravans, etc., all that stuff has been proven to be either fear-mongering or just straight-up lies. I mean, for example, most of the drugs come from inside the United States. I mean, the majority of, things that, the drugs that are actually killing a lot of Americans in the opioid crisis are actually coming from pharmaceutical companies. And the drugs that do come in from other countries in the United States come through legal ports of entry. On immigration, there is net zero immigration on the border from Mexico. A large majority of undocumented immigrants are here because they flew in, they stayed here legally, and then overstayed their visas. Now, undocumented immigrants, by the way, they also commit less crime than native-born Americans. They don't get federal welfare benefits, on and on and on. And until recently, by the way, it's an emergency now, but over the last couple of years, it was not an emergency. You know why? Because they spent their time and focus trying to cut corporate taxes. So yeah, emergency, right? Emergency. No. So look, there's been a lot of pushback, of course, obviously from the Democrats. For example, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi responded by saying, quote, first of all, it's not a national emergency. It's a humanitarian challenge to us. And I would say the humanitarian challenge is, of course, what do you do with, for example, unaccompanied minors, which is a big problem during the Obama administration. And, there are refugees, of course, that are coming in from El Salvador and Honduras. And we do need to do something about that. I would suggest not throwing them in detention camps. That's a generally bad idea. Let's not do that. Let's actually get more immigration judges down at the border so we can adjudicate those cases, and we can decide who to let in, and who is dangerous and who's not dangerous. And the vast majority of people that are coming in as refugees are not dangerous, are not threats at all, are not criminals. So, let's actually do that. Let's get more immigration judges at the border. That would be really smart and actually solve more problems. But anyway, that's the humanitarian crisis, right? Well, Pelosi continues. She said, the president is basically making an end run around Congress. And said, and I love this, if the president can declare a state of emergency on something he created, just think what a president what different values could declare as an emergency. Oh, this is a warning, right? I actually like this. Like, oh, you can declare a national emergency, right? Well, what if the next president says, I'm going to declare a national emergency on someone else? What are you going to do now? Republicans, watch out. Be careful. Don't let him do this. Imagine, and I'm imagining President Bernie Sanders calling for a national emergency on student loan relief. Love it. Or how about a national emergency on climate change so that we can get a Green New Deal? If anything, that is a real emergency. That is something that we actually have to do something about. Could you imagine, though? You know what? Not bad. Not bad. I'd actually go for that. Now, more Democratic reaction. Senator John Tester said, I don't think that's smart. I don't think that's a smart thing long term at all. Well, there you go. He said, I think it sets a standard for declarations of emergencies that just about anything could fit into. And he isn't going to be president forever. And I think it takes away power from the legislative branch. So it's a failure on all sorts of fronts. So now the Democrats are actually looking at this a different way. They're saying, but wait a minute. We like having a lot of this power. Well, we like keeping that power in the legislative branch. And constitutionally, they would be correct in that power staying, the power of the purse in this case. But, you know, Trump is not interested in that. Trump is just interested in doing whatever he can to keep his base happy, right? Now, there's more here. Speaking of Republicans, he says, I'd like to know which ones they're talking about as far as taking money, where he would actually take the money from. He said, and the devil's in the details. What are you taking the money from? Listen, I think there's probably all kinds of lower priority spending, but I'm not sure that's the type of money that's really available here. So he's like, oh, where are you going to take the money? You going to take it from, like, something that actually we care about, or what? What's going to happen? There's also Democrats that are wondering if the judiciary, if this happens, will step in, and what would happen. Senator Richard Blumenthal asked that question. He says, there's some basic principles. When Congress appropriates money, that's the law. If the money is reprogrammed, the law is violated. The court should stop it, whether it's the president or anyone else that illegally uses that money. So that's what it's come down here, right? So what this is going to be is this is going to be a big legal battle from here on out as soon as he declares that national emergency. It's going to get challenged. It's going to get challenged by all the Democrats, of course. It's also going to be a big challenge in the courts. So what's going to happen, right? I don't know. On the one hand, you would think maybe Donald Trump is feeling very optimistic about this, considering that there maybe is a Supreme Court. Maybe he thinks, these guys, I appointed them. I appointed 2 justices to the Supreme Court. It's time for you to give back your favor, right? I put you guys there. Now you're going to back me up. I don't know if that's going to happen. Honestly, like, I don't like Justice Gorsuch. I don't like Justice Kavanaugh. I even hate saying Justice Kavanaugh, right? But will they compromise their principles so much to actually flagrantly violate the Constitution? I don't know, because really this move is so obvious. It is so obviously unconstitutional and motivated by nothing but politics. You can't honestly look at the data and look at the facts and see that there is an emergency at the border. There is not. It is plain and simple. This would be an abuse of presidential authority. And I think that this entire idea does make some conservatives pretty nervous. Some conservatives, there are sycophants out there that are, of course, saying, oh yeah, no, Trump definitely should do this. Maybe they thought he wouldn't do it, or maybe they don't care about the Constitution. And that would make sense because a lot of conservatives are authoritarians. So that's the other thing, right? I mean, but then again, it is so flagrantly illegal. And of course, then there's the other thing. Even though there are conservatives that are like, yeah, we're totally authoritarians and we'd be in favor of it. But if the Democrats get into power, they get the presidency, and then they can declare, you know, an emergency on what? Taxes. National emergency, we're going to have to tax the rich. Oh, that'd be great. But then again, I'm smart enough to know that if you do that and then you get out of power, that leaves a bad precedent. Again, Trump doesn't understand that, right? So I don't even know, thanks to that ramification, that Gorsuch or Kavanaugh would end up supporting this. Not to mention the other conservative justices. But I think for Trump, this is his Hail Mary. This is his last option. And he is going for it. Now, interesting timing, right? Because McCabe just came out, Andrew McCabe. He was a former FBI deputy director that was fired by the administration. He just came out with a book that was making Trump very, very nervous. So I'm wondering if this is also just a gigantic distraction. So whatever it comes down to, distraction or not, this battle going forward, it's going to now have to depend on conservatives in the court holding the line. And you guys know that whenever that happens, I am very, very discouraged because I don't trust conservatives to actually respect the Constitution. Okay. Speaking of Andrew McCabe, let's go to that story. This is probably what he's trying to bury. Former FBI director, deputy director, start that again. Former FBI deputy director Andrew McCabe, like so many of his peers after being fired, has written a book about the Trump presidency. And of course, it's lots of fun. But there's actually a lot of details in here that a lot of us already probably know about the Trump White House, about the administration. Nonetheless, I want to go through some of them because they are fun and interesting. So let's go to Trump's tenuous grasp on the truth. Now, from the book, according to Axios, McCabe says, and I love this, every day brings a new low, with the President of the United States exposing himself as a deliberate liar who will say whatever he pleases to get what he wants. And obviously, he will also do whatever he wants, or try to do whatever he wants, or get other people to try to do whatever he wants, even if it's illegal. And we've had that story before as well. So, but look, those of you who've watched the show before, or are actually, following what's going on with the Trump presidency, you already know this, right? You're like, yeah, shocker, right? We have more people that have worked with him, and in this case, investigated him, and they're saying he lies constantly. He cannot help himself. And we know that. We know he can't help himself. It's obvious. Now, unfortunately, there's a lot of his supporters that don't believe that, even with the evidence right in their faces. I mean, there's no wall being built right now. Yes, there is now apparently going to be a state of emergency, and that's breaking news. But even with that state of emergency, there's going to be a gigantic court fight. So that's going to get probably dragged on for quite some time. All the while, there is no actual wall being built. So, and I'm sorry to say Trump does not have a plan. He's basically being erratic the same way that he's always been, and throwing whatever, he can at the wall to see what sticks. He's not playing three-dimensional chess. Those tax cuts, numerous reports have shown that it did not benefit the middle class. It benefited the extremely wealthy and corporations. I can go on. His lying, though, has led to people taking more notes of their interactions inside the administration. In fact, McCabe had wrote, I wrote memos about my interactions with President Trump for the same reason that Comey did. To have a contemporaneous record of conversations with a person who cannot be trusted. Hey, man, look, at this point, who doesn't have notes whenever they meet with Trump? I would not be surprised to see that everyone who has a daily interaction with President Trump writes down exactly what's happened, or might even be recording it. That would be interesting. And look, the reason is, of course, that he's a pathological liar he changes his mind, and then he gaslights you about it. He says one thing today, and then the next day, or sometimes even several hours later, or a couple of tweets later, he says something completely different. And then he tells you something, you do it, and then later on, he blames you when the thing that he asked you to do later on blows up in your face. There are numerous stories of that happening. I mean, look at the short career of Sean Spicer. Constantly being thrown under the bus, following lie after lie after lie after lie. So it's not a surprise. It's not a surprise. There's more. There's another interesting quote here for why he and Comey took the steps of making sure to detail their meetings. He said, "People do not appreciate how far we've fallen from the normal standards of presidential accountability." And look, guys, I know that it feels like this has been normalized. We have been living in this nightmare for about 2 years. And so, look, most of this by now, you guys aren't shocked. Nobody's shocked anymore. We're far beyond shocked. But we have to remember, we have to remind ourselves that this is not normal. This is not how a normal government works. This is so outside the bounds of what is supposed to happen. It's dysfunctional at best. It is a word that I cannot say at worst, right? Because honestly, I don't think there is a word just for how crazy this is. But anyway, there's more. He said that today we have a president who is willing not only to comment prejudicially on criminal prosecutions, but to comment on ones that potentially affect him, which of course opens up possible obstruction of justice charges. In fact, McCabe himself admits, I set up that investigation. I am set up an investigation where we are looking into whether or not Donald Trump obstructed justice by firing James Comey, and then, eventually him getting fired as well. That will factor into it. And then he admitted it too. And the way that he fired McCabe, by the way, was fired just literally days, maybe hours before actually getting his retirement. So there is a reason. There is a reason that he did this, and it's political retribution. But do you guys remember the New York Times op-ed, the anonymous one, where they talked about using the 25th Amendment, right? Well, it turns out that McCabe and people at the Justice Department had openly speculated about doing that. CBS's Scott Pelley talked about this on CBS this morning, and he said, quote, "They were counting noses. They were not asking cabinet members whether they would vote for or against removing the president, but they were speculating." Now, again, that doesn't sound like that much. Oh, they're just speculating, right? But in reality, we are so used to this insanity, and having this kind of thing be normal that we don't realize how not normal this is. We are speculating. The Justice Department and people inside the cabinet are talking about, I wonder if we should maybe use the 25th Amendment to remove our president because he's mentally incompetent. That's not normal. That's not normal. It's an incredible admission. And it not just came from the FBI, the Justice Department, but again inside the White House. People who work with him every day, who see him all the time, who do briefings for him, who actually help out with things. They know best because they have to deal with it every day. And sometimes they go on the record telling everybody, oh, no, it's fine. It's a fake news media. But in reality, they know it's not fine. And they're just, I don't know, holding on for power. I mean, why don't they use the 25th Amendment? A lot of them, I think, are incredible cowards. And the reason is, of course, comes down to politics. They're afraid of actually being open about this. They're afraid of going after Trump because the base, the GOP base, they love him. They welcome the insanity. And he is a product of what is already there. I mean, you wonder why people love Trump so much. They believe he's been sent by God. They're the evangelicals. And of course, there are people that have bought into the massive amounts of fake news being put out by right-wing pundits and Fox News, etc. And then there are just cultists. And then, of course, there are the people that go, I don't care what he does. I don't care what he says. I don't care what he does. he hates the same people that I hate. And he wants to do something about it. Well, that's good enough for me. And that just shows you that he's not an aberration. He is a reflection of the modern Republican base. Racist, misogynistic, selfish, greedy, believers in conspiracy theories. They consume conspiracy theories all the time. They're anti-science, anti-fact, and they're filled with some of the most obvious projection that anybody's ever seen. They project their insecurities. They project what they want to do to other people onto liberals, onto Democrats. And in all of that, Trump is their voice. It's their guy. He hates who they hate, or pretends to do so. And maybe he's running the most elaborate con I've ever seen. But I think in reality, no, he's just like them. He is the Fox News president. And he's got the money and power that he never earned. And he uses that money and power to crush people every single day. And there is, of course, him not backing a plan, for example, to pay people that were hurt during her shutdown. The federal contractors. No, I'm not going to pay them. I'm going to stiff them. They did the work anyway. They were furloughed. But I'm not going to give them money. How many times have we seen that? And, of course, the Republicans, his base is like, yes, yes, crush those other people, those government workers. I don't care about them. That's why it's their guy. He's living their dream, and they absolutely love him for it. And that's all while the rest of us are living in a nightmare. No, we do have to get him out. 25th Amendment, right? 25th Amendment. I don't know what's going to happen with the Mueller investigation, if that's going to be enough. I don't know. I am a little concerned about that. If they're going to only talk about collusion and not go after money laundering, etc., financial crimes, or any other sort of criminal element, then I don't think they're going to get him. I don't think they're going to get enough to remove him. And if that case, if that doesn't happen, then we've got to make sure that the Democrats run a candidate that can destroy him in 2020. If not, we're screwed. Okay. So now let's get to the reaction here about this. All right. Ever since some of the excerpts from Andrew McCabe's new book have dropped, Donald Trump has been lashing out, especially in regards to the discussion about using the 25th Amendment to get Trump out of office. Now, McCabe, of course, was fired as deputy director of the FBI literally hours before he would have been eligible for his retirement and his pension. That, of course, is definitely timed to inflict maximum pain on McCabe. It is a huge slap in the face. And so here you have this book that is delicious revenge. Now, in response, of course, to the book coming out, Trump took to Twitter. He said this: disgraced FBI acting director Andrew McCabe pretends to be a poor little angel, when in fact he was a big part of the crooked Hillary scandal and the Russia hoax. A puppet for Lincoln James Comey. IG report on McCabe was devastating. Part of insurance policy in case I won. Many of the top FBI brass were fired, forced to leave, or left. McCabe's wife received big dollars from Clinton people in her campaign. He gave Hillary a pass. McCabe is a disgrace to the FBI and a disgrace to our country. Make America great again. There was a lot in those two tweets. Wow. Oh no, Andrew McCabe was part of an insurance policy just in case I won. Oh, you mean the victory that nobody thought that you would actually have? Okay, that's really strange. But you can, it's all of this. It's just conspiracy theories, man. He's just pulling everything out of his hat, and he's throwing it at the wall, and he's seeing what sticks. And so far, I mean, none of this stuff is true at all. Nonetheless, speaking of disgrace, we're going to, I'm going to read some tweets here Social media corrected the president. Bradley Moss says, your own former personal attorney stated that he couldn't allow you to sit down with Mueller without a written script, lest you perjure yourself. Now, if I recall correctly, that is one of his attorneys, I think it was John Dowd, that quit because Trump's a moron. He's like, oh my God, the guy's going to perjure himself, and then I'm going to get in trouble. What are you doing? You can't just sit down with an interview. You can't outthink Mueller. And so he is a raging moron. And he's been through a lot of lawyers. Rudy Giuliani is probably about the worst lawyer that he's had, but he's had others that just couldn't take it anymore. We're done. Now, there's more. John Aravosis, says, no, you're the puppet. And that's a reference, of course, to the campaign. I think it was a debate. I think where Hillary Clinton called him a puppet of Putin. And he says, no, you're the puppet. I know, he's a very stable genius. It's a great retort. Joy Herstelenhan says, POTUS is entering enraged tyrant zone, where his revenge will be dangerous in the second term. That's a good point. If he ends up getting a second term, there are no limits. I hope that will not happen, but I mean, we could only see. We can only wonder. Now, continues, the GOP is allowing this man to go without a challenger in 2020 is unleashing a monster. And look, if we don't run a populist like Bernie Sanders, I think it's very likely we're going to get screwed. Bernie Sanders, or to a lesser extent Elizabeth Warren, actually I think would have a pretty good chance. No, you put up Kamala Harris or somebody like that, or Beto. I'm really worried about what would happen. Brooklyn Dad Defiance says, you don't believe in anything except stuffing your own pockets at the expense of any sucker who will believe you. A third-rate racist carnival barker spewing lies constantly. You are a disgrace to humanity. I can't argue with that. Nats45 says, President Trump continues to berate anyone who can tie him to the many Russian contacts he has. He exhibits guilt every day with his behavior. Innocent people don't act like this. Look, personally, I think Donald Trump has laundered money for the Russians. This is not the actions of an innocent person. He's guilty of something. I don't know what it is. He's guilty of something. And I think a lot of you would not be surprised that he would be guilty of something. He acts like someone who is, criminal. Anyway, and it's just up to us to actually prove it, to get into his bank accounts, to get into his tax records. Why do you think he's had the world's longest audit? As far as the Russians go, look, I don't know if there's collusion, right? But the reason that I'm saying go after his tax returns, go after his financial information, is that I think that there is money laundering. He's probably laundering money for the Russians. Those are the only people that would ever loan him money. And look, they've overpaid massively for space in Trump Tower. What is the most effective vehicle for money laundering? For transferring large sums of money? Real estate. Especially real estate in New York. Not only that, but you have the Trump Tower Moscow deal, which he apparently had worked on thanks to at least Michael Cohen and his admissions. And at least Michael Cohen worked on it well into the campaign and even after he won the nomination. There's a lot of very interesting stuff on there about that. And a lot of it involves Trump getting financed by Russian oligarchs. You want to say that there's no coincidence? Come on. No, I think Trump owes a lot of money to a lot of people because he can't help but go bankrupt. He's been bankrupt 6 times. His daddy is no longer there to bail him out. He probably blew through his $400 million inheritance from his dad and bungled pretty much every real estate deal that he's ever had. He's got to owe money. And that, of course, would make you susceptible to another country, a foreign country's influence. But that's just me. Anyway, Roy Meredith says, part of me is actually glad our president has the mental capacity of a child. It means that even I could become president someday. It used to be you could look up to, the president of the United States as a smart person, even if you didn't agree with him, you would understand that at least they knew stuff, they were smart, they were hardworking, they applied themselves. In this case, nope, not at all. There's no respect. He's literally the laziest person that has ever occupied that office. 7 hours of executive time. He's got his own golf simulator, which, by the way, sounds badass, and I would love to have it. But you're also supposed to be working. And but when he's not going to Mar-a-Lago, he's using the golf simulator. He's eating cheeseburgers, watching Fox and Friends, and drinking Diet Coke. That's the president's day. It's almost like a dream job, except that you're actually supposed to do things. But apparently he's living his best life on our dime. All right, there's more. Real PA Dissident says, I see you're back to being scared again today. And look, let me just point out that not long after these tweets, Trump decided that he would sign the bipartisan border legislation, right, where he gets $1.375 billion to build some steel slats, but also is saying that he's going to declare a national emergency in order to build wall, right, in order to build his wall. So, distraction, totally distraction. But Paul Kirk, more tweets here. Not in case you won, in case you abused the justice system, which you have. Looking forward to your pardons of Donald Trump Jr., Jared, Ivanka Trump, and Eric Trump. That will start something. Nothing would make him look even more guilty than when he starts pardoning people that are involved, that are part of his campaign. We're looking at Paul Manafort here. If he pardons Manafort, that says something very interesting. Lauren Damewood says, on the anniversary, and this is a great point here, of the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas mass shooting on Valentine's Day, the only thing this guy's mind is in is the fact that he's going to go to jail if he can't succeed in undermining the criminal case against him. From his point of view, I guess it makes sense. That's really important. A lot of people have kind of missed that this is the anniversary of an incredibly deadly mass shooting in Florida. And is the reason, of course, that why we have the March for Our Lives, a renewed push for gun control. And yet still, of course, the government, Congress will not take up any pieces of gun legislation to try to prevent another massacre. Because, look, I don't report on a lot of these shootings anymore because they happen so often. But instead of actually declaring a national emergency on gun violence, for example, no, it's about the border, and really it's a distraction from all the stuff that's going on here. So, and to make that point, Mark Hackett says, number of publicly known indictments and guilty pleas from and to Mueller, 34 people and 3 companies. And finally, I think the best one here, Bernie Michalek says, well, this should help McCabe's book sales. Look, if you're a Trump official or you're in the White House right now, you can be sure that there is money waiting for you as soon as you leave and write a book. This isn't the first book to come out. People who have had, interactions with Trump or was in the Trump government, it ain't going to be the last one. And those books are going to be very, very interesting to read because, as I've said before, this is the most not normal, dysfunctional administration I have ever had the displeasure of living through. And I'm pretty sure a lot of you feel the same. Okay. We'll take a break. We'll come back. We got more stuff for you guys. So super chats, I will read them after the break. We'll also do see about members, maybe give some more shout outs, all that. So send your messages and we'll be back right after this quick break. Around the Nation. Welcome back to the show, Around the Nation right here. Jeff Waldorf here with you. Just have one super chat here from LL, who wishes everybody a happy Valentine's Day. Well, thank you so much, L. Happy Valentine's Day to you as well as everybody in the chat. So thank you for that. I don't necessarily know how much I actually celebrate Valentine's Day. I'm married, and so, you know, my wife and I, like, we do things, you know, special things for each other pretty much every day. So it's like one of those things where it's kind of Valentine's Day every day for our family. But nonetheless, if you're doing something special, that's awesome. And, you know, to all the single folks, have fun as well. Because, you know, you should. That's a great message. I don't know. I don't really know what else to say. So we'll just move on, because that's awkward. Oh, I think my mouse stopped working. I think my mouse is dead. Great. Awesome. So I'm going to have to take another quick break here. I need to get a new battery in my mouse because it just died. All right. One more second here. Okay, we're back. For realsies this time. My mouse works. Wow, it's fun when your battery just runs completely out and I can't switch to tabs. iFart Magic says, Happy Valentine's Day, everyone. Thank you. Thanks for the super chat. I see somebody saying Elgato Stream Deck. Way ahead of you. Already got one. And I love it because it works great. Okay, anyway, I've wasted enough time. Let's get into the stories. Now, recently, President Trump has decided to sign the border deal negotiated by Republicans and Democrats. Now, that border deal gives him far less than he wanted for a wall. And now, of course, he's planning to declare a national emergency. But before this happened, Trump apparently had called his friends over at Fox News to help with some damage control. Now, the New York Times reported on Wednesday that the White House had sought to minimize damage by tamping down on criticism from the right for what they called, of course, the most punishing defeat Mr. Trump has experienced as president. I mean, think of it this way. The Democrats had originally offered $25 billion for Trump's wall, specifically for wall funding, which is insanity. That is the extreme right-wing position, right? The extreme right-wing position is give him money for the wall, $25 billion. It would have cost anywhere from $20 to $70 billion, by the way, to build a border wall, right? So he originally, rejected that proposal in his hubris, in his complete arrogance. Then he got crushed during the midterm elections and then tried for 5, He ended up getting one. That is a massive, massive loss. When you get a lot less money from what the Democrats had originally offered you, that is a massive loss. That is a complete bungle. I thought he was a deal maker. He's a terrible deal maker, and we know that already. Now, after that colossal bungle and failure, he decided to call his friends over at Fox News. Now, one call was to Lou Dobbs. Now, Lou Dobbs is, of course, a favorite of Donald Trump. He always tries to watch his show live, right? And does some live tweeting. Another one was to Sean Hannity. Now, Sean Hannity, of course, regularly talks with the president, according to the Times. Now, what did he want them to do? He wanted them to salvage his public image as a deal maker by helping him come up with excuses and then actually going on the air and telling his audience that those excuses. So now what happened? Well, Sean Hannity, like a good little loyal soldier, he said, quote, "You saw a big change in tone." I'm sorry. This is from CNN report talking about Hannity. He said, "You saw a big change in tone from people like Sean Hannity when he said he wasn't happy with the deal, but he believed the president would make some kind of executive action if he did sign the deal to avoid a government shutdown." Now, that's actually true. He actually did that. So I guess point for Hannity, right? And this was Trump telling Hannity, no, don't worry. Say this, and then I'm actually going to do an executive action. So here you have the media colluding with the White House. Oh, fascinating. Now, CNN's Caitlin Collins also reported that we learned in the 24-hour period that there was a slew of phone calls from the White House to people like Hannity and Laura Ingraham, as well as, of course, Lou Dobbs. 3 people out of the president's favorites telling him 2 things. One, that this was a loss in part for House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Now, how was this Nancy Pelosi's loss? Well, a lot of progressives will rightly point out that, hey, man, she said no money for the wall. And she gave him $1.375 billion. That's a criticism. It's fair, but again, I think it's one of those things where, yeah, but they actually, Trump, it's a major loss for him. Because in the end, he got way less money than he asked for. And the whole, thing with declaring a national emergency, that's going to be probably tied up in court for quite some time. So that was the other thing that he was saying. Let's see. Let me get here. If the president does sign this, he will declare some sort of national emergency or take executive action to secure funding for the wall. And again, that's exactly what happened, right? Now, she continues. She says, right now, they are not saying whether the president is going to sign this. This was an older report. We do know that the president is signing this. And, he is, again, actually declaring a state of emergency. Now, the article also mentions that he reached out to Mark Meadows. Now, Meadows and his allies were among those targeted by the White House in hopes of avoiding a more threatening conservative revolt. And as we see, there was not as much of a conservative revolt, except for maybe Ann Coulter, who I talked about yesterday, and Tomi Lahren. Tomi Lahren got dragged on Twitter for this because apparently she wasn't the one that was in contact with the White House. And these guys, Ingraham, Hannity, and Dobbs, they knew ahead of time because Trump had reached out to them. So, here you go. We're going to give you actual information ahead of time on this, so you know that what we're going to do. We're going to telegraph it to you. And so you can go out and you can do damage control. So I guess it actually is effective because it did work. And it was actually what he was going to do. But now, could you imagine, right? Obama calling up Rachel Maddow and Chris Hayes and telling them, for one, don't be mean in the interviews, right? Be very soft. And also, here's what we're actually going to do. So go out and say these talking points on our behalf. And then that makes us look stronger when in actuality what we had was a super weak deal. Could you imagine right-wing heads exploding if that happened? Of course. Now, of course, in reality, established media will defend their own, and they probably would have defended Obama anyway. But not without, but they wouldn't have had that inside information because that's something that I don't think the Obama administration would actually do. This is literally planting talking points, right? Now, if you're an outsider like Ilhan Omar, however, well, you got to watch out, because any criticism is going to be met by calls of anti-Semitism. But anyway, that aside, right? Hannity, Ingram, and Meadows, as well as Dobbs, they're the biggest Trump guys that you can imagine. And so they were really worried about these guys going out and criticizing Trump for this terrible deal. So that's why, of course, they felt, well, we have to tell them what's going on. We have to do some collusion with them and tell them ahead of time this information, and so that they can go easy on us when they do their reporting. When you have to worry about your closest supporters criticizing you, well, then you know you're in real trouble, right? You know you're in real trouble. And so he knew it was a loss. It's a big one at that. And he knows that this emergency thing that he's doing now is basically the last thing that he's able to do to try to get funding for his wall. There is no other way. And, well, now you know. Okay. Let's go to Dining While Black. And recently, a Missouri man had the police called on him for basically dining while black. Now, the man's name is Terrence Dickerson, and what happened is it was his birthday. And so for his birthday, he decided to make reservations for him and 30 of his friends and relatives at the Blue Sky Tower Grill in Richmond Heights. So now he gets his friends together for, a big party, birthday party. And look, the complaints against him wasn't that they were being loud, but that they were afraid that this party wasn't going to pay their bill. Now, Dickerson said that he had signed a contract reserving the party space at the restaurant and had a written agreement with them, saying that guests would be able to pay for their own food and drink on separate checks. Now, part of that agreement also involved the waitress, who would be able to collect a 20% gratuity on each separate bill. So that's great. If you're a waitress in that area, 30 people, and you have the possibility of all getting 20% tips from all of them, oh, that's fantastic. Because nothing would be more annoying than, of course, having a small tip while serving 30 people. So it's actually a really good deal for the waitress. Yet, for some reason, the waitress, not great. Now, what proof do you have, of course, of this deal? Well, he showed a local TV station an email that showed that arrangement. However, the trouble started when the waitress refused to serve the group because she felt overwhelmed by that large party, in her words. However, I do think it's because I don't think these people are going to tip me. That's what I'm assuming. So look, okay, if you're not comfortable with serving that table, then okay, well, maybe you should go and maybe they should give you a different waitress. But that's not what happened. Apparently, the waitress had complained to the owners and the rest of the staff, and they ended up calling the police. In fact, according to Dickerson, she left and never came back. The next message we get is the police want you to leave. Why? Why would the cops suddenly want to get involved? Police said that they were called at 8:20 p.m. for a possible disturbance at a restaurant, and they sent 7 to 8 officers to investigate. 7 or 8 officers sent to that restaurant for that party. Are you kidding? Well, of course, they heard that it was a large group of black people that are disrupting a peace, so I guess they had to bring an army of officers. Thankfully, of course, the cops quickly found out that black people weren't doing anything wrong. Nobody got arrested. Nobody got in trouble. But still, they ended up having to leave the restaurant for some odd reason. Now, according to Police Chief Doug Schaeffler, who was the Richmond Heights police chief. He said, "We quickly found out that it was not a disturbance, just a misunderstanding over how the group would be billed. If it would be one check or an individual check. But it wouldn't be. You're absolutely wrong. They already had a pre-written agreement, and they could show you that agreement. It is written in an email." Nonetheless, they're like, "No, we completely disregard this deal." The owners did, the restaurant did, and said, "We're not going to honor it. And in fact, what we're going to do is we're going to make you pay everything as you leave. We're going to line you up with the cops, single file, to make sure that you pay your bill." Ridiculous. Dickerson told the police station that he believes the restaurant assumed that he and his guests would not pay the bill because they're black. And he was very embarrassed that they were forced to line up in single file and pay before they were escorted out by the cops. That is deeply embarrassing. That is deeply disrespectful. But look, that's how this restaurant treated their guests, as if they are criminals because of the color of their skin. Friend Hofton Nelson said, quote, "This was very embarrassing. Police told everybody we had to go upstairs because it was a bad look on the place." So wait, you're saying that 30 black people having a birthday dinner somehow look bad on the place because they're, what, black? That's what's going on here. Now, Hofton Nelson continues. He said, "I told him the fact that we have a black party of 30, we have a contract to be up here. It looks bad because you have 8 police officers here and no laws are being broken." Look, guys, again, this is frustrating because white people keep calling the cops on black people for things that are not crimes. Fellow white people, you got to stop this. I mean, really? This wasn't a dispute about how they're going to pay. They had clearance ahead of time. They had an agreement. And that arrangement was broken by the restaurant. But, you know, look, what happened was it's all about the assumptions, right? So the restaurant and the server sees these guys, oh, they're black. They're either criminal or they're not going to pay their bills, so we're not going to serve them. And the waitress herself, I'm assuming, assumed that they weren't going to pay because, or weren't going to tip because they're black. You know who the worst tippers are? I'm assuming, without evidence, and at least I'm fair at admitting that, unlike Tucker Carlson, who went on his own bizarre rant about progressives being terrible tippers. No, I think evangelicals are probably the worst tippers. Whoever the people that end up taking those fake $20 bills and using those as tips, you know, the ones with Bible quotes and Jesus on them. Yeah, those guys, those are the worst tippers in the world. Well, I mean, I guess they would be the worst if it weren't for the people always calling cops on black people for doing normal stuff. Those people are actually the worst. But those people are also the ones that I mentioned. The evangelicals, giving those ridiculous $20 bills, definitely worst tippers. You can't get worse than that. Okay, anyway. That's it. That's all I got time for today. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you guys for going around the nation with me today. Thank you so much. Thank you for the super chats. Thank you for, thank you to the members. By the way, you want to sign up to be a member, hit the join button. And also, if you want to sign up to support us on Patreon, which you can pay $1, $3, whatever, however much you want to send to support the show on a monthly basis, you sign up patreon.com/TYTNation. All right. Thank you, guys. I'm going to be off till Monday. So we'll be back. We'll see you on Monday. Have a fantastic weekend. Have a great Valentine's Day. Thank you so much. Love you guys. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, nation. We'll see you on Monday. TYT's next.